It just came up. Mario,
No,
Mario.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Let's start. We're on Eruvin Pei Aleph, 81. So the Gemara says, Tanina Chadazimna. We already learned this, that you can make an Eruv with any type of food. But Kol Ma'arvin U'Mishtatfin Chutz Min HaMayim V'Melach. Why repeat it in our Mishnah? Amar Rabba Lafukim and Rabbi Yoshua. To show that we don't hold like Rabbi Yoshua. The Omar, Tikar in, Midi Achrina Lo. Rabbi Yoshua was one who said you can only make an Eruv with a loaf of bread. And nothing else. Kamash Balon, that we have to be told in our Mishnah that no, we can make Eruv with other things like fruit or shemen or yayin. Eis ve'abaya, bakol ma'arvin eruv chatzeros. You can use any food item to make an Eruv for Eruv chatzeros. Uvakol mishtatfim shutufim mavuos. You can use anything for a sheet of mavuos. Lo amru la'arv b'pas ela b'chatzer bilvad. When they said to use bread, that's when you're going to make an Eruv between chatzeros. Now, man shamislei, who is the Tana that we know? The Omar, pas in, midiachrini lo, it's Rabbi Yoshua. Yet it says uktani bakol. How could Rabbi Yoshua, if only allows bread, how come it says bakol, that you can use anything? So, Ela Omar Rabbi Rachana, lafukim and Rabbi Yoshua. The Omar Shlema in Prusalo. Rabbi Yeshua was one that said if you're going to use bread, it's got to be complete, without a piece missing. Kamash Lam Bakol, that even if it's a piece, this Mandamar holds that you can make an Eruv even with a piece. Uprusa my time alone. Why, in fact?
Why was I have a minute to think? Because you need Lechem Mishnah for Shabbos. Is that why?
No. The Gemara now is going to explain why Uprusa no. Uprusa my time alone. Why just a piece, not a whole loaf? Why could you not use that for name? Rav Yossi ben Sholem Rabbi Mushum Eva. Because let's see, if each person has to contribute a loaf, and each one, or let's say each one has to contribute bread, and let's say there's 20 people, and like 18 of them give you a full loaf, and 2 of them give a piece, it's going to create fights with those people who only gave a piece. Like he only gave a piece, I gave a full loaf. So they made it a standard, it's got to all be a full loaf. What if everyone made an Eruv with a piece? So then there's no Eva. So why don't we allow that? Because then it'll go back and people will then start giving a full loaf, and there will be people who only give a half loaf, and it will lead to fights again. Let's say the person gave a loaf, but the amount that had to be removed for challah was removed from the loaf, or the amount that was truma in there had to be removed. Can you use such a loaf? The answer is yeah, ma'arvin loba. You can use that. Freik the Gemara va'atanya kedei dimua ma'arvin loba. If you remove the amount for truma, you can use it. But kedei chalasa ein ma'arvin loba. But if you remove the amount for challah, you don't make an eruv with it. Lo kasha habachalas nachtam habachalas balabayis. That means a baker only has to give 1/48 of his amount because he makes a huge amount of dough. So if you remove only the amount of a chalas nachtum 1/48, so that's an inconsequential amount that we allow. Habachalas balabais, which is 1/24, which is a larger amount. Disnan shir chala echad me'esrim va'arba. Standard shear to remove for challah is 1/24. Also, yisalatzma v'yisalamishtav. No, you're baking for yourself or for your son's wedding. Echad me'esrim va'arba, 1/24. Nachtom, a baker, shu oisalim kor bashuk, who's going to sell the bread. V'chena isha. Let's say a woman creates a backyard business and she makes challah and she sells it to the community. So we see that it's a different shear depending on if you're a balabais or if you're a professional. Amrav is the tfara bekisim. Let's say you have a toothpick and you stick the piece together back to the loaf with a toothpick. Marvin Labah. You can use that to make the eruv. Afraid to go about Tanya a Marvin Labah. There's a price that says you can't. Like kasha, hadia diatifra, hadaloya diatifra. If you can see that the piece was a piece, then you can't use it. But if it's done in a way that you can't tell that a piece was taken off of it, then you could use it for the eruv, because people are not going to be upset that it's a prusa. Amrav Zeir Shmuel, ma'arvin bepas oiriv ubepas doichen. You can use bread made out of rice and made out of millet. Amar maruk v'ledidim efishleminei Mar Shmuel bepas oiriv ma'arvin. Bread made out of rice you can make an eruv. Bepas doichen ein ma'arvin, but millet bread you can't. Amar ma'arvin bepas adoshim. You can use lentil bread. Versus Eini, I was in the years of Shmuel, he threw it to his dogs, even the dogs wouldn't eat it. So this is a bizoyon dika bread. How could you make an eruv with it? The halacha is you can use rice bread and lentil bread, but not millet. So how could you say you can use adoshim? Because that was made out of not just lentils, it was made out of other things added. That when Nevuah in Yechezkel was given, that the Jewish people in Jerusalem are going to be undergoing starvation. That's wheat and barley. Upul, that's beans. Vadoshim, lentil. V'doichan, millet. V'kusmin. And that's how you're going to have to make your bread. So this bread was made of not just adosh, it was made of other things. The fuel that was used to make that bread was human dung. It shows how degraded they were. What do you mean that they ate a barley cake? It's not, we make a drasha, it's not barley. They never ate a good amount to fill them up. They ate only small amounts. It wasn't, the bread did not have a beautiful appearance like wheat bread. It had only like a barley appearance. Mishnah. A person sends $1, $5 to the grocer who happens to live in your mavli, with the idea that when it comes time that the people of the mavli are going to come to the grocer and gather a certain amount of food for the shituf mavuos, he's like prepaid it. Rabbi Yezer says you're allowed to do so. However, no, you can't prepay it. You can't have it be him be mezakeh. Nesinas kadaf enough is not. You can make him a shaliach, but to give him money to say that money will have a, because remember money is not koine. You have to do mashicha or agbah. So it was not koine for him. So therefore, he didn't really participate in that eruv. However, moedim b'shar koladim shezachu l'moyosef. However, if he didn't give the money to the grocer, he gave it to one of his neighbors. And he says, I want you to be mezakeh with your eruv, that you're allowed to do. Everybody agrees to do that. Rashi, Balabai Shamal Chavero, Hilich Moazu. Take this money, v'zocha li be'eruv, and be zoicha for me the eruv, halach v'zikalo, Shekana eruv the hoil vein balabayis rogelim korkikoros. The regular person is not selling bread. Lonis kaven zel asos shaliach. In this version, he's making the guy shaliach. V'nasako amelo arevli that you're allowed to do. Gabi chenveni gufei iomele arevli. Also, if you told the chenveni to make him a shaliach as well, that would work as well. And she'ein marvin lodem el midaiso. He has to know about it. Hilkach Rashi, Gabi Chenveni ki ormele zachili. Lo niskaven el knosem menu. V'lo samach alav shi'asa shlucho. He didn't rely that he made him a shaliach. Mos en ekonos. Lo samcha daite. Nim tzamarav lo shlomi daito. So therefore, if later on the Chenveni makes him the Eir, he did it without his das. But if the Balabayas was Moshach the key card, he gave it to the Chenveni, then he made him a shaliach, and then it would work. See, you're allowed to be Zoichel Adam Shaloi B'Fanav. If I see a lottery ticket with Harold's name on it, I can pick it up to be Zoicha for Harold because it's a pure Zechus for him. But if I see an IOU in Harold's name that he signed, that he owes somebody $1,000, and I pick it up, and I go to Harold, oh, I was coining this for you. Harold can reject it. He says, I didn't appoint you as shaliach to put me in a liability. I accept it if it's a merit for me, but not if it's a liability. That's a concept of zachin l'adam shaloi b'fanav. So when do we say you need the das of the person? So when you have a city Eruv Tchumin, because normally we have 2,000 amas, but I know that my Rebbe is coming 3,500 amas to the east. So I can lay an Eruv down 2,000 amas away from the city to the east. So on Shabbos, I can travel 4,000 amas. But it limits me. I can't go anywhere to the west. So in some ways, it's a chov. So when does Rabbi Yehuda qualifies and says, when do I need the das of the balabais? Because it's a potential choy for him. That's be'eruv tchumin. Aval be'eruv chatzeiros ma'arvin l'daito v'sh'l'daito. Listen, to be able to carry from your house into your chotzer is a pure unmitigated schus. There's no chav there. So therefore, I can have the guy participate in the eruv midaito or shalom midaito. Lefi. Why does this work? Right? We can be zoicha on behalf of somebody even without him being there, as long as it's completely meritorious for him. My time in Rabbi Eliezer. Now, Rabbi Eliezer says it does work if you give the money to the Chenveni, even if you don't appoint him a shaliach. How does that work? Haloi moshach. So he never acquired it. So the guy ends up doing it shalomi daito. You know what? This case, asar Rabbi Eliezer ka'arba prokim b'shana. So there are 4 times a year where Chazal really minatora mo'os konos. That when you give money to acquire something, you acquire it even with the money. Chazal made a gzeira that if Harold, I'm buying from Harold 1,000 bushels of wheat, and Harold has it in his upstairs attic, and I give him $1,000, but I don't take the wheat to my possession. I leave it in Harold's possession. So the problem with that is if we say Ma'os Konos, once Harold gets paid, he's not going to be that careful to make sure a fire doesn't break out in the attic. And Me'ikar Adin, if it's mine because I gave him money and Harold doesn't have to watch it and it burns up, it's my cheshbon because it's mine now, even though it's in Harold's possession. So they made a gzeira, no. Most Me'ikar Adin is Kona, but we're going to say it's not Kona unless you actually remove the wheat from Harold. So that way there's none of this problem where Harold's not going to be shomer it properly. However, 4 times a year, and we're going to see when that was, Chazal made a takana that no, really mo'os are konos. It's not. Ba'arba prokim elu, Erev Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach, Erev Pesach, and Erev Shavuos, Erev Rosh Hashanah, and Erev Shmini Atzeres, and Erev Yom Kippur in the Galil, says Rashi. Mashchitin es hatabach bal korcho filu shor shove elef dinner vein lokech el dinner echad koifnas olishcha. So listen to this. Guy goes to a butcher and says, I want to buy $10 worth of meat. And the butcher says, I don't have any meat to sell. I've got to shech this new cow. The cow's worth $1,000. So the society forces the butcher 4 times a year to shech the whole cow, even though if the guy gave him $10, he's still forced to sell. He's coining it and he has to shech the animal. And because it's such a busy time, it's obvious that he's going to be able to sell the rest of the meat. Lefichach, however, therefore, im meis lokeach. So once the purchaser gives the money to the butcher, and before he shechted it, the animal died, the loss is to the purchaser. Because here we say ma'os konos. We don't, now, meis lokech. Now, mal lokeach, why would the purchaser suffer the loss? Halo moshach. He didn't take the cow and lead it away. Rav Huna says, no, he did do Mashiach. That's why. So if you tell me he did Mashiach, it says, Bishar Yemos Hashana, the rest of the year, ain't okay. That means if the purchaser gives $10 to the butcher, he can give the $10 back. He's not required to shecht a $1,000 cow to give the guy $10 worth of meat. And therefore, the mos are not koinos. He needs to do Mashiach. We'll see in a minute. And therefore, the halach is lefichach imeis meis lamocher. It never changed hands because mos technically did not coin it to the purchaser. But based on what you just said with Rav Huna, that the Reisha was, he was moishechet hamoshach. And if he was moshachet, then it's the possession of the purchaser. Why do you say it's meis for the mocher? On Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak, la'olam b'shalom mashach. We're talking about in both cases, he didn't do Mashiach. The butcher was koine to the purchaser through a third party. He gave the shore to the other person. V'amar lo zachalo bo b'shem ploni. Be zoich on behalf of the purchaser. V'ula asa shliach loso achraz zakom. And he didn't make him a shaliach.
It's a deposit. If he gives a deposit of $10 for $1,000 cow, how can he be of ownership? No, even if he makes the Mashiach, what did he make? Does he have $10 worth of?
Just $10 worth.
Huh? So
Chiddush is here, Elazar, is if we force the butcher Erev Yontif has to provide meat to Klal Yisrael. So even if he has no meat that's stored, he's got to shech the new animal.
Because he sell the rest.
What?
But because he's going to be able to sell the rest because it's before Chag.
No, and it's normally ma'os or konos. So when I gave the money, Minat Torah ma'os or konos. So when I give him $10, he's required to shech the animal for me and give me $10 worth of meat. Minat Torah. It's just the rest of the year we say that doesn't work because even though ma'os konos we make a gzeira that no, you got to do Mashiach in order to gain ownership of it. But on those 4 times a year, ma'os revert to what they normally are, and they're kona midoraisa.
But I was saying, well, let's say if the animal dies, so does he have to give back his $10, or does he say?
We said in meis look. In the first case, we said in meis lokeach. If mos konos, he gave him the money, then really it all belonged to him. So he doesn't have to give him the $10 back.
But he only had $10 worth of the animal. He doesn't. It's if I go buy a car.
But he can't give him any meat. It's in the vela, so that the animal's dead, and he's not, and that's it. He has the money, and it's Kona, and it was his bad luck that the guy died.
No, but he only was. But let's say the other way, the guy himself who put the $10 down. What most Kona what $10 worth of the animal?
Correct. He was entitled to that once he shechts it. But if the animal died before he shechts it, he's out. He's out of luck. He gave his $10 in most or konos. So the loss accrued to him. He doesn't get his $10 back. If it's maced to the other guy, he gets his $10 back.
Okay.
So, but ba'arba prokimela d'schusulo, since it's a schus for him to be zoicha al yidei acher zochim lo shelo b'fana, but b'shayim osashon dechovulo, because he's spending money, it's a chov. It's not so that important. He has meat and chovin lo b'fana. Then the taking away money from him has to be done directly in front of him. Rav Yochanan v'arba prokim elu hemina chachamim divrei al divrei Torah. Chazal got rid of their normal takana that most are not koinos, but in these times of year they said most are koinos. Rav Yochanan dvar Torah most konos. So how come if minat Torah money is kona, why do they come up with this concept of Mashiach? Because like we explained, like the story I said about Harold and the wheat in his attic. Because if I give money to Harold and most konos, so basically now the wheat belongs to me. And now a fire breaks out in Harold's attic, I lose out all the money. I lose the wheat. So Chazal didn't want that. Chazal said, it's only kona when you actually do Mashiach, when you remove it and put it into that's what we want. Because we want to protect the guy who bought it. Now, if he gives money to somebody other than the Chandani, it works. My shar kol adam, I'm Rav Balabais, a Balabais who lives in the Mavui. When did we say if you give it to a Chandani or a baker, he's not a Shaliach? A Balabai is koine. It does work with the Balabai. It's only money. Aval kli kona. Kli is like a kinyan sudder. Like when we sell our chametz with Rabbi Krause, and he lifts the pen and he does a kinyan chalipin. So a kli would be koina no matter who. If he uses the word sche or kne, then you have this problem. Even to the grocer, to the baker, if he made him a direct shaliach, that when they lay the food down, and I want you to be a shaliach, to be zoicha for me, then of course it would work. Because there it's a chov for him. It's not always a schus. But if it's a rechatzeres, it's always a schus. Then it works even shalomi daito. Then you can give the money to the grocer, and it would work as well. Rav Yehuda, Rav Yehuda. The halach is like Rav Yehuda. V'lo od. El kol makom sheshon Rav Yehuda be'eruvin. Whoever we have a din of Rav Yehuda, the halach is like him in Eruvin. Amalei Rav Chana Bagdatzol Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Afilu b'mavui shenitlu korosav l'chayav. Now let's say you have a mavui, and the koira olechi that permitted you to carry there was removed. Where Rav Yehuda said a din there, Rav Yehuda was meko, that you're still, as long as it was kosher, and you started Shabbos, the lech and the koira were there. If it fell down, he still allows you to carry there. So is that the halacha like Rav Yehuda or Merlei? No, because be'eruvin amartilo, below b'mechitzos. Lechi or Korah established a fictional mechitza. So that's a din in mechitza. And there we're not always poskening like Rav Yehuda, it's only by Eruvin. When you said halacha was like Rav Yehuda, michlal de pligi, Does that imply that somebody was arguing with Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi? Kol makom she'omer Rabbi Yehuda emasai ubameh, like bameh dvar mamur b'mishnah seinu eno lefarish dvei chachamim, and he's not arguing with chachamim. So there's no machlokes. So what do you mean halacha like Rabbi Yehuda? So the Gemara immediately says, what do you mean velo pli? Velo pli? They do argue. Banan tnan nitos fale. Let's say new dwellers of the Mavui move in, and you need more food. So we said, moisifu mezakeh v'tzarech loidia. It says you can add, but you have to inform them. So this lechora, we're not possible like Rabbi Yehuda, who says that when it comes to chatzeiros, it can be done even shalom idaito. Oh, says the Gemara, that's a different case. B'chotzer shebein shnei mavuos. Two mavois with a chotzer in between. So the chotzer has, once he makes a shittif with one mavui, it prevents him from walking in the other mavui. So it's a choiva for him. So remember we said, ein chavin l'adam shaloi b'fanav. Once it becomes a choiva, not a pure schus for him, then it's got to be midaito. And there's another statement. How can you say there's no pligi? There is pligi because we have that the chaver of Rabbi Yehuda were arguing with him. Ella gavra karam is. You have a machlekes amiroim here. So what's the problem? Mars hara pligi, Mars hara loy pligi. One elder was an argument. The other says there's not argument. That's not the end of the world. They have a machlekes amiroim. How Rabbi Yehuda held it, whether it was a machlekes Rabbi Yehuda or not. Okay, tomorrow, Mirz Hashem, we will learn at 9:00.